For the folks that are just joining in, thank you for attending. We're going to be talking about the mobile user solution for Prisma Access, which is based upon GlobalProtect cloud services. We're going to talk about all the pieces and parts and best practices along the way. There will be a Q&A session at the end, but we will not answer questions as we go along. We'll kind of save them for the end. There's a QA functionality. So please utilize that versus chat or anything else. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about the mobile user solution for Prisma Access GlobalProtect. We're going to talk about authentication. We're going to talk about the configuration and best practices as we go along. The idea of the portal, as well as the MUSPNs or mobile user security processing nodes. Troubleshooting and deployment. We're going to talk about security policy rules. We're going to talk about HIP. We're going to talk about logs. Talk about a lot of stuff along the way. First of all, we'll begin with what do you need? You or your customers for the mobile user solution. Well, first of all, there's licensing for this. There's licensing for the mobile user solution with either the Enterprise Edition or the ZTNA licensing. That is licensed for the number of unique users, mobile users. As an example, I've got my desktop, I got my laptop, I got a tablet, I got a phone. I got 4 or 5 things that connect through Prisma Access mobile user solution. But I just count as one single user. So we are licensed on the number of unique users, not devices, nor locations or anything like that. You do have to have a Cortex Data Lake account to store your logs. Anything Prisma Access and many of our other solutions log to our cloud-based logging facility, which is Cortex Data Lake. And there's several different iterations around the world for that. And you want to get close to where you're at, right? You also want to make sure that you have, okay. I do hear some problems about my audio. I apologize for that. Hold on a second, folks. Let me see if I can fix that. Stand by.
Okay. With any luck, that's a little bit better. So anyway, as I was saying, you also do want to make sure that you have the ability to do any sort of services, have a corporate access node and a service connection if you need anything. So when would you need this? Well, if you have mobile users that need to authenticate back to a data center or something like that, or whether it be cloud-based or a physical data center, maybe for SAML or multi-factor authentication or LDAP or whatever the case may be. If you have users that need to reach internal DNS servers, anything that they would need to reach internally would require some sort of a service connection. And those are also, they're part of the licensing with the mobile user solution, the ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Architecture, and the Enterprise Edition, which is sort of our everything. As far as authentication, we support all the authentication methods that you might be used to on a firewall, an on-premise firewall from Palo Alto Networks. Radius and LDAP and certificate-based authentication, multi-factor with several different third-party vendors, Kerberos, SAML, all kinds of different ones. These require you to have appropriate authentication profiles and server profiles and things like that. But one of the tips I might give you is when you are initially setting up the mobile user solution and you want to have a simplified model for making sure everything works, is to go into the local user database. You'll see this under your templates under the device tab, and way towards the bottom, you'll see a local user database. This is a great way for you to create a test account to make sure that the components, the pieces and parts of Prisma Access, the portal and the MU SPNs, things like that, are actually working without complicating things with possible problems with a remote authentication server or multi-factor authentication or things like that. It just sort of makes everything easier to troubleshoot. Then later on, or enable a server profile pointing to whatever sort of authentication service that we're using. As I said, we have things for LDAP and Radius and TACAX Plus and all kinds of stuff like that, as well as an authentication profile. So an authentication profile is going to tell your users how they authenticate, to which server or service they authenticate, and also supports multi-factor authentication, giving you the ability to use multiple vendors, such as Ping ID and Okta, and we support 4 or 5 different ones. The configuration menu and configuration steps for the mobile user solution are spelled out as you configure those. We give you this nice little gray opaque overlay that tells you what you need to do. And basically there's 3 major steps, as you can see here. Our template stack and parent device group, which if you've ever configured any other pieces and parts and components of Prisma Access, you're familiar with this process. Zone mapping, which is required on most of the different deployment options, and the GlobalProtect portal. The portal is very important to all of this. And you are required to have a single GlobalProtect portal. It must be deployed within the Prisma Access cloud. If you or a customer has a deployment that has on-premise Palo Alto Networks next generation firewalls that are acting as GlobalProtect gateways, and Prisma Access mobile user solution, which is GlobalProtect in the cloud, you can combine your 2 architectures together, but the requirement is that the portal is in the cloud. So if you have a customer that has a on-premise firewall that's acting as a GlobalProtect portal, we need to switch the portal to a cloud-based one. And we'll see how we do this. If you have additional template values that you want to mix in and add to the GlobalProtect or the mobile user solution, yes, you can do that, as well as device group settings, such as security policy rules. So your typical solution for mobile users in the past has been that these mobile users would log in or attach through some sort of remote access VPN to a physical firewall at a data center. And at the data centers where they would have their security processing, such as security policy rules for allows and denies, decryption, things like that. Well, the whole idea of Prisma Access is to move that firewall closer to your users so that they do not have to go all the way back to a data center before they got to the internet, right? We can send them, we can get them there faster. So the security policy rules that were at your data center firewall are probably appropriate at all the security processing nodes for your MUSPNs. So if you had an existing Palo Alto Networks firewall at a data center with appropriate rules, well, you just port them over to Prisma Access for mobile users. And the way you do that is to take those rules, which would be part of your device group settings for that firewall or that group of firewalls, and place your mobile user SPNs in a device group below that. Because the way this hierarchy works is that the firewalls below will inherit the settings from, or the firewall groups below will inherit the settings of the firewall groups above them. So you can add your new Palo Alto Networks mobile user gateways, or mobile user security processing nodes. This is what you'll see them called in any of our materials, but in the Panorama GUI, they still call them gateways, which refers back to our physical firewall solution. But hey, it works for this too. But the idea is you can stick us below another device group that had a bunch of rules that you want us to inherit. This means you don't have to rebuild these rules over and over again. It's very simple. Palo Alto Networks, next generation firewalls, PAN OS, whether we're talking about on-premise firewalls, whether we're talking about Prisma Access, uses the idea of source zones and destination zones to designate the source and destination of traffic, as opposed to interfaces and things like that. It allows you a lot of flexibility in creating rules. If you have an existing set of rules with many different source and destination security zones, like my internet zone, my user zone, my guest zone, my DMZ zone, my PCI zone, and things like that, you can adopt and map those zones to the appropriate side here with Prisma Access. Prisma Access only understands that there's traffic that's inside of Prisma Access, which is called trusted, or the trust zone, and traffic that's out on the internet that's dirty, that's not trusted, the untrust zone. So if you have existing zone names, you map them over to one side or the other. If you're a customer that did not have Palo Alto Networks on-premise firewalls and does not have an existing set of security policy rules, or does not have them zoned, you can simplify this really easily by creating a zone name that represents the untrusted side and a zone name that represents the trusted side. In this case, we used internet for the untrusted side and Prisma Access for the trusted side. You could say inside, outside, that sort of thing. What you do not want to do is copy these exact zone mapping terms. In other words, you do not want a zone called untrusted nor a zone called trusted. Every deployment requires a portal, and the portal is the first connection that a mobile user makes. Think of it as the air traffic controller or the traffic cop, or the piece that tells users where they can go and how to get there, and what rules, what limitations they may have as far as connecting and disconnecting and things like that. So they sort of set the rules, set the laws. You need one in your deployment. There's no benefit for having regional ones or having one in one place and one in another place. It just one is what you need. users are going to reach it through a host name. GlobalProtectPortal.company.com if they have their own domain. Or if a company doesn't have a registered domain, well, we got our own. It's called gpcloudservice.com. And a customer is welcome to use ours. There's no additional cost for it or anything. They just got to come up with a unique host name. Portal.gpcloudservice.com. It was taken 1 million years ago. You have to come up with something a little more clever. So you deploy the portal. The portal users are going to authenticate at the portal using whatever authentication service and server profiles and stuff that you set up earlier. Again, this is where I would suggest you create a user in the local user database on that portal device, just to eliminate any external problems as far as connecting to authentication servers and stuff like that, because we're up in the cloud. Maybe the authentication server is behind a firewall. Maybe that firewall is not a Palo Alto Networks firewall. Maybe you have certain port numbers you need to have open, things like that. So it simplifies the configuration, and later on you can add the authentication server to take care of this. There's something called internal host detection. People often misunderstand what this is for, or the need for it, or if they need it. So with our on-premise firewalls, there is this concept that a user could bring their own home device into an office, connect with their different credentials using a non-corporate device. Well, would recognize that user and then go, okay, this is Bob in my case, and he's okay to connect. I don't need I'm inside the network. I don't need an IPsec tunnel. So this internal host detection basically takes that device and says, hey, look, if you are able to authentic, or if you are able to resolve an IP address to a host name, do a reverse lookup, and it's successful to this internal IP address, you're inside the office. You don't need the IPsec tunnel, so you don't have to build that. If you don't have on-premise firewalls acting as gateways, you don't need this. In fact, it may break things to try to use it, so do not use that. You're also able to deploy gateways. So MUSPNs, I'm sorry, is what we call them now with the mobile user solution, in all the different regions. Now you are either going to be licensed regionally, say in one region like North America or South America or Africa, etc. But within each region, there's going to be several different locations available with a map view or a listed view of names. When you're deploying, you want to make sure that your locations are close by your users' physical locations on the ground. If you look at this little screen on the right there, the little screen capture, I've set up one portal on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. If I had users in the middle of the United States, and I'd pick a location or two there too. I want my users to be close, or my MUSPNs, my gateways, to be close to my users. How many can I pick? Many as I want. Does it cost me more money to have multiple locations? Nope. It's all based upon the number of individual users, the logins, the authentication, not even the number of devices, just the users. So don't be stingy. Choose at least 2 locations, more if you need to, more if you want to. And what we will do is we will build up these different MUSPNs, these different mobile user security processing nodes, wherever you need them. And a cool thing that we'll talk about in a minute is they also scale automatically. Now, just like if you're talking about a traditional on-premise remote access VPN, when anybody connects in, they need an internal IP address. So you'll have to set up IP pools. They can be set up regionally, or we're going to have a worldwide pool, or a mixture. So what happens is users will use their appropriate regional IP pool until it runs out of addresses, and then they'll start using the worldwide one. Or if you have users from a region that's not listed, but they'll use the worldwide ones first or exclusively. You want to make these pools big. They're internal IP addresses. You obviously don't want them to overlap any other IP address ranges you have. And it's really important that you have sufficient IP addresses. Oh, what do I mean by sufficient? Let's go back to what I was saying. Hey, when I connect with my mobile user solution here in my office or here at home, I've got a workstation, I got a laptop, I got a phone, I got an iPad. I might have, another iPad. Maybe I've got, my Ring doorbell at home or whatever going through GlobalProtect. Hey, I could have all those things, 5, 6 devices. I need to make sure that I have enough IP addresses for my user base to have multiple IPs. So in general, 5 to 10 IP addresses per user concurrently, with whatever your maximum concurrent number of users might be, is probably what you need. I would not do anything smaller than a /23. In fact, they're free addresses, right? Use as many as you need. Use as many different IP ranges as you might need. You can have multiple different ranges, or pools. No, there's no problem there. You just don't want overlapping ones. Also, any sort of like internal DNS servers and things like that you might need, or Wins configuration you can set up. So as you deploy Prisma Access for mobile users, let's explore the pieces and the parts and the deployment process and troubleshooting any problems you might run into. There are 3 pieces. Going from left to right, there's the portal, which is sort of the air traffic controller, the traffic cop that then controls where users who use the GlobalProtect client software on the right-hand side get to connect, and they connect through the MUSPNs there in the middle, or a on-premise GlobalProtect gateway. They're equivalent to each other, and they can integrate with each other. So the GlobalProtect client software, we have it for just about any flavor of operating system, including Linux, Macs, iOSs, Android, Windows, you name it. The way this works is that a user will connect to GlobalProtect either automatically or maybe proactively, depending on how we set this up, and first connects to a portal or the portal. There's only one in your deployment, and the portal authenticates the user and says, "Oh yeah, you're one of us. You're okay to connect. Here are the rules for your connection. Here's a list of gateways or Prisma Access MUSPNs that you are able to connect to. Here's your authentication method when you connect to the gateway. Here you have the ability to disconnect whenever you feel like it, or disable, or maybe you don't." So settings and rules for connections and things like that are sent by the Prisma Access portal. Not security policy rules and stuff like that. Those are set on the different MUSPNs, the different gateways. So the user will be authenticated, get a set of guidelines or bylaws or rules or whatever you want to call it. Then they disconnect from the portal. They connect to their appropriate Prisma Access MUSPN, or perhaps there's a list of multiple ones, and the user connects to the closest one, or the closest one that responds first. So we do a proximal connection model, but that can be overridden on the portal. We can set different rules. You can say, hey, you know what, Bob, you connect to location 3 as your primary, and location 1 is your backup. So location 3 is there. Hey, that's where you stay. Now you're going to want these different gateways, these different MUSPNs, to be deployed close to your users, as I mentioned before. And the question often comes up, how do you control the number of users that connect to a MUSPN, or is there some limitation? Well, there's not a limitation. What we do and what we will guarantee we do in the background is we will scale up with as many nodes, as many MUSPNs in a location that are required to handle the amount of traffic and the throughput and the users and things like that. They'll be clustered and front-ended. We will auto scale up and down as needed. This is nothing that the customer has to worry about, nor do they have any settings or anything like that. It's straightforward. You choose the locations. We make sure we got enough power there to handle your users. And this is dynamic. You know, if you end up having a large conference in Chicago or Vegas or New York or something like that, and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of users there that there weren't there before, yeah, we'll scale up that location for you. So as you set up the GlobalProtect portals, portal and the locations and the gateways, we are going to use templates that are going to display or add any sort of network or network settings. So I was about to say network or device settings, but there's really no device settings. Including things such as login help pages, which can appear or not appear. The authentication profile. When you authenticate when you connect to the portal, how are you going to authenticate? As I said, during the primary or during the initial deployment, probably not a bad idea to have a local user name and password on that portal, so that you can eliminate any sort of problems with connectivity to authentication servers and stuff like that. Hey, once this works for you, then you start adding those remote servers and making sure that they work, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to troubleshoot, to be able to say, well, is this problem coming from a deployment issue, or like a misconfiguration issue, or what the problem might be. I mentioned that the portals set all the rules for users. So if you look at this picture on the right-hand side, an example of some of the things we'd see is just like a connection method. There's 3 different connection methods. There's on-demand, which means that a user, in order to connect to Prisma Access from mobile users to portals and the MUSPNs, have to open up and start the client proactively. And then when they're done, they disable and turn it off. The user logon method, which you see at the top there, is our most common popular one. That basically anytime a user logs on to their device, the mobile user SPN or the mobile user solution automatically launches, connects to the portal and the gateways and all that sort of stuff, and uses the credentials that the user logged on with. A list of which gateways, which MUSPNs or physical gateways are available to you is there. Do you want to allow users to disconnect on demand or not? Do you want to allow users to upgrade their GlobalProtect app or not? All those sort of things are controlled through the portal, and these rules are pushed down to the user every time they connect to the portal. One of the cool things we do with Prisma Access for mobile users is to be able to collect host information and leverage that information for security policy rules to allow or deny users whose devices meet certain conditions or fail to meet those conditions. Host inspection or HIP, host inspection protocol stuff. Basically, there's a list available of all the different components that we're able to check, and you have the ability to add rules based upon the condition of a user's device and say, hey, you know what, if you're running the latest greatest update of Windows, sure, you're good to go. If you're running an older version, we're going to limit what you have access to, or things such as that. We'll take a closer look at that as we go along. These security processing nodes or gateways, as they're referred to within Panorama, are the way that your user gets their security inspection. They're the equivalent of a firewall, but they're in the cloud. They can have their own authentication method that's the same or different than at a portal. And again, I would begin by using a local user database to authenticate users. There's really not many other settings to set in the gateway settings, other than whether or not you want to use IPsec tunnels or SSL tunnels. So there is a checkbox to enable IPsec tunnels. It's turned on by default. But if you just wanted SSL tunnels and not IPsec tunnels, you can turn it off. If you're a customer or a partner of ours that has deployed GlobalProtect with on-premise firewalls using this model, you're probably really amazed at the simplicity of the deployment with Prisma Access for mobile users. We pre-configure almost everything for you. It's very few steps. Now, it gives you a lot of flexibility to change our pre-configured settings, but a lot of the stuff we already have for you. And then once you have your portals, your locations, your gateway and portal template settings, it's a matter of committing and pushing these settings to Prisma Access. Another hint I would say is, even if you are deploying multiple pieces and parts at the same time, like mobile users and a service setup and remote networks at the same time, when you do the commit and push to Prisma Access, push one family at a time. And if a box there is checked and there's no new information, definitely uncheck that. That just causes problems. You'll push it to Prisma Access. It's going to take a few minutes. You are able to go under the Panorama status menu and go to the monitor page where you get the geo view, the map view. And you can actually see the locations that you're deploying the gateways at, and you can track the progress of those gateways, those mobile user SPNs. What you can't see is the deployment or the progress of the portal. And the portal takes a little bit extra time. It takes about 10 minutes longer than your MUSPNs to deploy. So once you see these green lights, you may or may not be ready. Another little tip or trick here. You can actually open your browser and connect to the portal's URL, the portal host name, portal.company.com or whatever it might be, with a browser via HTTPS, and see what happens. One of three things will happen. You won't get any response, which means we're still building. Or you may see this error here, this generic error. That's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. That tells you that the portal's almost up. The container, the host is up. We're pushing the configuration settings there. It's just not quite ready yet. It may take another 5-10 minutes, even up to 15. But that means we're making progress. And the third thing is you connect and you actually see like a hello message and maybe the ability to download the GlobalProtect client or things like such as that, or maybe a login prompt or something like that. But the error is not a bad thing. Error is a good thing. It means we're almost done. You also have the ability to look at the status of your deployment under the Panorama tab under Cloud Services Status. And you can see, of course, the deployment and the status of all your different pieces and parts. But for mobile users, you're able to see if the deployment is finished successfully. You're able to check the config status. The config status tells you if you are in sync with what is configured on Panorama versus what's configured in the cloud. And then the overall status. If there are any errors, you can go back into the geo map. You can click on the error, and you can see. You also have the ability to view how many mobile users are connected at any moment and see the details of them and where they're connected from. We've added a lot of reporting here for our mobile user solution. Under the user ID logs and under the GlobalProtect logs, you're able to see users logging in. Under the GlobalProtect logs, you're also able to see connection events through GlobalProtect, whether it's the portal or the MUSPNs. You're able to see events for every stage of the connection. So an attempt to connect, a success, a failure, etc. Before login, at login, as the tunnel's established, once they're connected, all the host information, all the details. There's quite a lot of great information under the user ID logs and the GlobalProtect logs. Also in the ACC, the Application Command Center, we've added a lot of reporting for GlobalProtect, which is your mobile users. Information about the portals and the gateways, successful connections, unsuccessful attempts, deployment overall statistics, any users that are able to connect or not able to connect, the reason for the failures. If you're looking for a user's public IP address, you'd find it in here. You're also able to monitor your deployment, your endpoints, your operating systems on these endpoints, the authentication methods that people are using, their GlobalProtect app versions, the different portals and locations and status of those. So there's lots of great reporting available to help you troubleshoot or see any issues. The last piece is going to be the security policy rules, and that host information that we talked about. So the host or HIP objects allow you to look at several different families of settings. Over here on the left-hand side on the HIP objects, you can see mobile device patching, firewall, anti-malware, disk backups, disk encryption. And you can basically create conditional rules. Here we have one for malware. It says, hey, you know what? You need to have anti-malware. And we have certain vendors that we support. And you have to have a database that's been renewed within the last X number of days. And you need to scan, your last scan has to have been so much time ago or within a certain time frame. Now here we said, well, we're going to use Bitdefender. You got to have a version within the last 7 days of the database, and you have to have done a scan in the last 1 day. We can take those settings and create a profile and add that profile to security policy rules as a matching condition. Security policy rules tell us what to allow and what to block. So I could say that if you pass and match this profile setting, you're okay. I can also do a negate and say, hey, if you don't pass this, then maybe we're going to quarantine you or isolate you or not let you into internal corporate assets, maybe just out to the internet or something like that. So we can restrict your access based upon that. And that's another really great way to control all the things you need to with Palo Alto Networks. If you think about Palo Alto Networks, we always preach visibility and control. Well, this gives you great visibility into devices, especially non-corporate devices that you don't have control over, and therefore control. So that are some of the steps for deploying